Welcome to the Lancaster Patriot podcast. My name is Chris Hume, the managing editor of the Lancaster Patriot. I'm joined this morning by two guests. To my immediate right, I have Joel Saint, pastor of Independence Reformed Bible Church. Joel, thank you as always for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And to my far right, I have Ryan Miller, also known as the Cultural Contrarian. Ryan, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much. It's delightful to be here today.
All right. I'm so glad you both are here, and we're going to be talking about a topic that we will certainly not exhaust today, and that is police officers in the United States of America, specifically related to detainment, what police officers do on the streets. Ryan has been involved with the police officers quite a bit lately. What was your latest interaction with the police?
Oh, quite recently, where I got pulled over for a non-traffic violation, just delicately and respectfully extracted.
Okay, and there's a video of you going around on the internet, Ryan. In fact, a couple of YouTubers have picked it up and have dissected it, provided commentary on it, and that is where you are interacting with a state trooper. Now, that happened last March?
Yeah, March 14th of 22.
Okay, of 2022. Okay, and we're not going to play that clip here. I will put that in the description. But in this clip, just to kind of set a bit of the context for what we're going to be talking about today, Ryan is pulled over by a Pennsylvania state trooper, Trooper Kochka. Is that his name?
Yes.
And in the video, Ryan actually stands his ground, as it were, verbally, and saying, look, what am I being detained for? Because this police officer, the state trooper, pulls you over. And what did he say the reason that he pulled you over was?
He pulled me over due to a suspicious vehicle.
Okay. And does he have a right to do that in our American system? Can the cops just pull you over and then, I mean, you weren't free to go, right? He said you have to stay here.
No, he physically detained me. No, physically. He verbally detained me.
He said you are not free to go.
Right.
Okay.
And it's very difficult for me I'm a little different. Words mean something. Can he do it? He can do anything he darn well pleases. Does he have the lawful authority to do so? No, he does not.
So we're talking about power versus authority here.
Absolutely.
He has the power.
Yes.
He has a gun.
Yes.
But he doesn't have the authority.
Absolutely.
And those are some of the things I want to get into. And we do want to be careful with our words, but part of the problem is we have our American system, which is not based on, at this point, we've been far removed from biblical law. So we had a foundation. There were things even at the beginning of America that were, I would say, an abandonment of biblical law, but we were closer. But now over the years, we've added all these things. So in one sense, some of these things we're going to say, the police officer had the authority, quote unquote, under the current American system. And in some cases, they don't, and they still act that way. But then also we need to step back and say, how should things be biblically? What do they have true authority from Christ to do? So these are some of the things I want to get into today, and we will come back to that traffic stop. I want us to talk about specifically with detainment and police officers, the culture of policing in America. We do want to talk about the Fourth Amendment. We want to talk about Terry v. Ohio. We want to talk about reasonable suspicion and probable cause, qualified immunity, and get into things, how the Bible relates to this. But I guess I want to let's start with the Fourth Amendment here, okay? And then we're going to come back. I'm going to ask you some more questions, Ryan, about this stop. But the Fourth Amendment says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures, and the seizures there comes into the detainment, shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So in this case, the state trooper did not search you, but he did seize you in the sense of a detainment, correct?
He seized me in order to conduct a search, and the search was through interrogation.
Okay.
So he was searching for facts through questioning.
Okay. Do you think that would be, most people though, when even in the court, when they look at the Fourth Amendment, they're not saying that's a search.
No, they're
okay.
not.
Okay. So, but there was a seizure there, and in the courts would recognize that as a seizure.
Okay, I know we're talking about the Fourth Amendment, but is that not a violation of the Fifth Amendment then? Because he's questioning you, trying to get you to incriminate yourself.
That is correct. So you need to, there's a bunch of amendments that are interlinked to express standing secure in the force. But that's a great point.
So I'm gonna lay some of these things out so then we can get into a little bit of the details. And again, we're not going to be able to exhaust it, but there was a case, a big case. I'm sure every police officer knows about Terry v. Ohio. It's part of their training. In 1967, there were two men who were, I think this was in Cleveland. They were observed outside of a men's clothing store, and this detective or police officer thought that they were preparing to rob the place. They were casing the joint, is how he put it. Basically, once they leave that location, they're not even at the site of where he thought they might be considering committing a crime, and he walks up to them and basically searches one of the guys because he says, well, I felt that he had a weapon and my life could be in danger. And so this is a big case. It's 8-1 ruled that, the cops do have the right to do a search, and they kind of, weaseled with the language and say it's not a full search, it's just a pat down. We're just seeing if there are any weapons, and then if we feel one on the outer clothing, then we can go in. And so the court held that the search undertaken by the officer was reasonable under the Fourth Amendment, and that the weapon seized could be introduced into evidence against this man whose name was Terry. So Terry stops now have become a regular occurrence in America. And I think that would what happened to you would kind of qualify as a Terry stop, would it not?
It would. The Terry officers in practice use Terry's terms reasonable suspicion, and they jump over the Fourth Amendment protection, reasonable suspicion supported by probable cause. So Terry versus Ohio gives the officers the power in their mind to just stop you, question you, and pat you down and physically detain you. So, yes.
So, yeah, I'm going to skip ahead here. This is some data. In New York City between 2003 and 2013, nearly 90% of Terry stops did not lead to a summons or arrest. There's Terry stops are happening a lot across the nation, and most of the time there is either no weapon or it leads to no arrest. So it kind of calls into question, what's your reasonable suspicion if you're doing this thousands and thousands of times, and most of the time you're wrong. So that's one of the issues with Terry stops. We want to talk about, Joel, we'll get to, do police officers, should they have that, do they have that authority from God to just say, look, I work for the state, so I can basically search you based on a reasonable suspicion. So I'm gonna bring you into this, Joel, and then we're gonna come back and talk more about what happened with you, Ryan. But this was the Supreme Court Justice, the only one who dissented in Terry v. Ohio, and I don't know why more of the justices didn't. He said, I'm going to read this quote. He said, "It is a mystery how this search and that seizure can be constitutional by Fourth Amendment standards unless there was probable cause to believe that, one, a crime had been committed, a crime was in the process of being committed, or a crime was about to be committed." Now, he's talking about Terry, who at the point when he was thrown up against the wall and searched, he was not even near the building where the cop said, I think he might be about to commit a crime. So there was no crime being committed. The crime was not in the process of being committed, and it wasn't about to be committed because he wasn't even on site. So he goes on here, Douglas goes on, "To give the police greater power than a magistrate is to take a long step down the totalitarian path. Perhaps such a step is desirable to cope with the modern forms of lawlessness, but if it is taken, it should be the deliberate choice of the people through a constitutional amendment. Until the Fourth Amendment, which is closely allied with the Fifth, as you mentioned, Joel, is rewritten, the person and the effects of the individual are beyond the reach of all government agencies until there are reasonable grounds to believe, probable cause, that a criminal venture has been launched or is about to be launched," end quote.
Amen, Douglas.
So, Joel, first, your thoughts on what Justice Douglas said here back in 1967. And he's saying, look, you're giving police officers greater power than the Fourth Amendment even gave to a judge to issue a warrant. In the case of that, you had to have probable cause to issue a warrant. Basically, the language of Terry is you don't need probable cause for a police officer to search you. All you need is reasonable suspicion. And we'll get into the legalese of that. But what's your thoughts initially, Joel, as we start to consider the culture of police in America?
Well, it seems to me that probable cause would be a whole lot more difficult to prove in court. He's doing something. A crime is about to be committed, for example. You wouldn't need probable cause in the first two cases. A crime had been committed. Okay, you already have the crime. A crime was in the process of being committed. Yeah, it's going on. The third one, a crime was about to be committed. If you were going to try to prove that in court, that would be, you'd have to have facts. You would have to have responses and so forth. Reasonable suspicion. I don't like the guy's look. I don't like his cousin. His cousin is a criminal, and you know what? He was seen hanging out with or he wasn't even seen hanging out with his cousin. He just. I think it's reasonable. So that is such a broad thing you can drive a truck through that, Chris. I mean, anything's possible with that. His point about a totalitarian path is mocked today. You'll be like, oh, we're not totalitarian because we still have, we're still democracy and we can still vote. And of course, without going down this path, you can, there's a difference between casting a ballot and voting, for example. I've cast a ballot, but I'm not sure who I voted for in some cases, quite frankly. But getting off of that, biblical law, the Bible talks extensively about crimes. And what it says, and we'll get into this perhaps a little bit later, but what it says is that you have to have exactly what Douglas is talking about here, at least the first two. A crime is committed or in the process of being committed. There is no such animal in the Bible that I know of reasonable suspicion. And that has to do with even the fact of a police force. Interestingly enough, in the scriptures, we do not have the justification for a police force.
Right.
It's just not there. Now, someone's going to say to me, well, don't you want to call the cops when someone attacks you? You know why I want to call the cops, honestly? One of the reasons why I want to call the cops? Because the way our justice system is right now, I could get in bigger trouble for defending myself than not. So I call the cops, so I have somebody else who is like assigned official crime prevention group. Well, wait a minute. I think if I'm having a crime committed against me, I think I'm the most qualified right then to put a stop to it, because the cops won't get there for who knows another half hour, just in time to identify the bodies and so forth. So one of the reasons why someone's going to come back at me and say, yeah, Joel, you want to call the cops if someone's committing a crime against you? Yeah, but I'd rather be left alone, quite frankly, so that I can defend myself and my loved ones. And I get it that that you're going to say you want, aren't you glad there's police officers? Here's the problem. What if the police officers themselves are lawbreakers as far as the law of God is concerned? So that's where we must go back. We must go back to the law of God, what it prescribes, and what are you going to do? And here's the question. What are you going to do if the police officer himself is a criminal, as far as the law of God is concerned? So that's where we must start here. What guarantees does anyone have that the police officer himself, or nowadays herself, is not a criminal to begin with, on the take, whatever, using planted evidence and this kind of? What are you going to do? Who's going to watch the watchers?
Right. Ryan, your thoughts on that?
There's a lot to unpack there, Joel, and you made it brings to me Romans 13 about the evildoers, and what if our government is the evildoers? What if the law officer is a good person but acting evilly in obedience to his authority? And I believe we, the people, are the fourth branch of government responsible. We have a duty to hold our public officials accountable. And as a Christian, we should be using the fruit of the Spirit. My encounter, I was relying upon the fruit of the Spirit to engage those in authority. The reasonable suspicion piece is what I'll call is the hallway of protection through unelected officials at the Supreme Court. Unelected people have made these decisions, and reasonable suspicion was a way to open this door to give them more power and control over top of us and protection. That reasonableness word will pop up in Supreme Court precedent over and over again. And it's not up to us to determine who is reasonable. It's up to the court and the legal system.
And specifically, when you look at these cases, and also with the case of Graham versus Connor,
yes.
What happened was they said, okay, we need to, actually let me go to that right now. We'll come back and cover some of this stuff. I have it in the back here. Okay, so there was an objective reasonable test that they came up with Graham. When Graham versus Connor, not to get into it too much, there was a diabetic who needed sugar and he wasn't able to get it, and the cops ended up roughing him up pretty bad. And looking at it, it seemed like that was very excessive. But what they ended up deciding was, well, we need to look at this from the perspective of the police officer in the moment. We can't look at this with hindsight, 2020. We can't do that. We have to look at it in the moment. And it all became from the police officer's perspective. And then it all becomes the sort of a game, to be honest, where, okay, this is the language the court has recognized. So police officers are trained to go in and say, okay, yeah, this is what I felt. I felt threatened. Here's what happened. He was coming toward. So all that to say, to your point, Ryan, the reasonable suspicion test and the objective reasonableness test have been either put in place or are used to empower police officers,
100%.
Not to protect the people. And I want to be fair to police officers, and I want us to talk about this because, Joel, you mentioned, biblically, do we need this system? We have this system now where police officers are tasked with really meddling in a bunch of affairs, things that aren't even evil, things that shouldn't be crimes according to God's law. But the job itself requires you to go out there and meddle in people's business, stop them on the side of the road, even though they're not harming anybody, ask them for information, ask them to surrender their private information, even though they haven't been accused of a crime. All that, like, if you put people in those situations, if you put police officers in those situations, then stuff is going to happen, and they're going to want to be protected themselves. So these Terry v. Ohio, Graham versus Connor, kind of has given protection to the police officers in this culture of, well, they're doing such good work, we need to give them the benefit of the doubt, and these are protections for them. But in the end, the citizens or the people's rights ultimately are subservient to the police officers. Now, you talked about what happens when the police officers are the wicked ones. Did you hear what happened to Matt Trewellas?
I did.
Yeah,
I did.
So I don't know, was that his son and daughter-in-law?
I'm not sure who it was. Someone from his church, at least.
Yeah, so out in Wisconsin, and this, of course, we covered the Damon Atkins case where a police officer in Reading arrested Damon for publicly quoting the Bible. This just happened in Wisconsin, I think, a day or two ago, where some young kids, I don't know if they were minors or not, were arrested or detained or taken away for
speaking.
For speaking outside of a homosexual pride festival. So again, the police officers, they're just doing their job, right? And we're going to get to that. And if they just look at this, hey, my job is to enforce statism. I'm going to use every available court ruling I can in my favor. So yeah, the probable cause. So you have initially a consensual encounter with police officers, which sometimes you may think it's consensual. And like in your case, Ryan, like when you said, hey, am I free to go? He's like, no, you're not. And so at that point, it moves from a consensual encounter to basically a Terry stop, an investigative detention. You are detained because I'm investigating a crime. And that's supposed to require reasonable suspicion.
But go back to what Joel said. Joel said when it's non-consensual, that you didn't agree to this stop, and you haven't committed any of those probable cause elements in the act of committing a crime, about to commit a crime, or a crime has transpired. You haven't done any of those things. I haven't agreed to this conversation. Stand on your fifth. I don't need to assist the officer investigate to criminalize a law-abiding citizen. And that's what my stop was.
Okay, yeah, let's talk more about that. Just maybe provide a little bit of education for people, even though we're going to get into even more of a critique against the police system. But this is the system that we have now. And you were pulled over for a Terry stop. Now, I guess if we're going to try to give him the most benefit of the doubt, in his mind, he's saying there has to be a crime at least in his mind somewhere. And then the crime and the crime based on that interaction with you would have been trespassing from a public property. But as you've made very clear, you can't be trespassing on a public property absent of committing a crime. So I want you to talk about that. But first, in his mind, that's what he's quote unquote investigating, right?
This is a little bit more nuanced than that.
But in the interaction,
he is trying to justify himself the reason for him to pull me over.
Right.
And he couldn't do that. He was using verbal judo
right.
to justify him seizing custody of me.
Right. But with these Supreme Court rulings and from the police officer's perspective, I mean, let's put ourselves in the perspective of a police officer who's just doing his job,
right?
Just following orders, which does not excuse him, because I want to talk about that. But they are taught to use the Terry stop, and they are taught that they have the authority to detain you because they have a suspicion that you have either committed a crime, are in the process of committing a crime, or about to commit a crime. Right?
That is correct.
Yeah. Now, so in your case, he did not have that. He didn't have that because he could not really justify what the crime was.
Right.
Right. And he tried to lean on trespassing from public property, but the only way he could do that is if you had already, right, there was already a crime or something, right? So I want people to understand that, and then I want you to talk about how you handled that situation, that if someone's pulled over, how can they stand on their Fifth Amendment rights?
I'd like to do a couple of things in response to this path of conversation. First of all, I know there's going to be officers that are going to be listening to this just simply because of the audience that follows me, and I want to share it with them. So I want to address first Trooper Kochka and other law enforcement. I respect those in law enforcement. I respect their responsibility and duty to serve and protect the community and the citizens within it when they fall inside the guidelines, the guardrails of the law. When they step outside of that law, it's my duty to remind them that they're stepping outside of the law. I choose to do that in the fruit of the Spirit, in love, in honor, in respect, and correct them, not necessarily rebuke them, but to make them aware that there's a limit to their authority. So in this instance with my video encounter, prior to even engaging with the police, I informed them of what my intentions are. So I went in advance and said, listen, I want to go advocate for children within the school district. I want the DA to know. I want the Chester County detectives to know. I want the local community to know. I have no ill will, no ill intent, and I just want to lawfully speak. And I informed those in law enforcement that I understand that your culture of training and authority is opposed to people who want to stand on their rights, and you attempt to criminalize it. And I'm going to warn you, please do not use your authority, it's called color of authority, to infringe upon my constitutional rights. And I will tell you what will happen if I encounter somebody who does that. So that communication prior to that stop was communicated all throughout the county months in advance. So Trooper Kochka didn't know me by my face, my voice, my presence, but he knew of me through this email communication.
Right.
So when I encountered him, I knew he was outside what the police call it the four corners of probable cause. And he was outside those four corners, and he was following orders. He was being directed by his chain of command, you need to find out who that guy is. I knew that was his intention. And I did not yell at him. I did not curse at him. I knew the limits of his authority. I had no right to get out of my car. But I know, Pennsylvania versus Mims, based upon the fear of the officer, that he can pull me out of the car.
Right. I mean, they can justify, with this language, they can justify a lot of stuff in saying, well, I was concerned that he might have a weapon,
Right.
and therefore I feared for my life, and therefore I had to pull him out of the car and search him. Thankfully, it didn't happen, and I will link it, and I encourage everybody to watch the video. And it's gotten, I think on the one channel, it's over 30,000 views already. Yeah, you definitely handled it very well. And it's parts of it are funny because, I mean, he's trying to, yeah. But, okay, the Fifth Amendment and why didn't you surrender your driver's license, or how can people, I know this is difficult. One of the things is you don't want to mess, I don't want to use that word mess. You don't want to, sometimes it's better to just submit completely with these things, because the police with these court cases have a lot of ability to really mess with people.
I would tell people, do not do or attempt to do what I did.
Unless you are prepared.
Unless you have gotten a tremendous amount of knowledge. If you understand what Chris has been talking about, Terry v. Ohio, Graham versus Connor, Pennsylvania versus Mims, Frazier v. Kopp, the list is long. Until you know them in your heart, don't stand in the face of authority.
But in this case, you said, look, I'm not going to, and that kind of leads to the fifth. I mean, if a police officer pulls you over and says, I'm investigating that my reasonable suspicion that a crime may have been committed, you're not required to give them any information.
As you asked, why did he pull me over? A suspicious vehicle. Well, inside my car, my window was down this far. I said, I give you complete permission to interrogate my car.
Right.
Because it's not reasonable suspicion of the driver. You said the car. Well, go interrogate the car.
Yeah. So one of the things you said in the video was you're not required to give your ID unless you've been
lawfully arrested.
Okay. So if you are arrested, then you are required.
I'm compelled.
Okay. So
wait a minute. Is there a difference between lawfully arrested and arrested?
It's a great point. It's a great point. Yes, because you can be unlawfully arrested. You, as the citizen, have to articulate that. What you're demanding of me is unlawful. I am not going to consent, but I'm not going to resist. I'm not going to argue. You have threatened me with arrest if I don't do this. And you have to know it's unlawful. That's what happened with the other encounter. I submitted to being handcuffed and put behind unlawfully.
That was on the school grounds there in Octorara. Right. But this isn't in my notes, but a cop pulls someone over for speeding or not stopping. I mean, in that case, are you, as your understanding with all these laws and rulings, are you required to give up your information?
Let's go to biblical. Let's go to constitutional.
Right.
And what we have,
and then let's go to the American system.
We'll go to contract.
Yeah,
go to contract. Everything is under contract and under permission. So I'm going to shift gears for a second. If you put your child in public school, you've signed a contract of in loco parentis, and you've surrendered your rights to the authority of the school. Well, when you get your driver's license, whether you know it or not, you have surrendered your right to travel to now be governed by the rules, regulations, statutes, and traffic code, because you signed that little document on the contract. So when you sign that, the terms and conditions, you've agreed to those terms and conditions. If you act in defiance of that agreement, now you're at risk.
Okay. Well, that goes another topic to the argument of, which we've talked about before, submitting to getting a driver's license and registration. So we don't want to go down that road too much, at least right now. Be happy to later. Okay, but other than that, if someone says, look, the police officer pulls you over and says, hey, this is not about, I mean, a lot of times they use that, oh, you were not following a traffic law, and then they use that to get into more. But let's say they pull you over and they're just like, okay, I have a reasonable suspicion that this crime was committed. Well, you're within your rights to say, well, I'm not going to give you any information on that, right?
You are, but absent of having the knowledge that you're talking about right now, you are going to experience the violence inherent in the system.
Okay, so and as a small step to help people think more about that, what would be the initial reason or initial grounds they could say, look, if you are suspecting me of committing a crime, I'm going to lean on the Fifth Amendment here. I'm going to not surrender this information until I talk to an attorney. I mean, what's the initial step here to start thinking through these things?
I got to tell you guys, he's going down a deep hole. and this is going to sound controversial. Again, do not do anything that I say. In respect of those in law enforcement, I hesitate to say this to other citizens. But a traffic stop, according to the Supreme Court, you are under arrest. Not a detainment, not a temporary detainment. The Supreme Court calls it an arrest. So if you're under arrest, we're afforded rights and protections under Miranda. So put your window down a little bit and say, "Officer, I'm under arrest. Please Mirandize me."
Okay.
And they read you your Miranda rights. Now you exercise and stand on those rights. You have the right to remain silent, because anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You can remain safe in honor and respect of the officer, that I don't want to make any movements whatsoever to put you in fear. I don't want to reach for my driver's license. I don't want to reach for my insurance. I don't want to reach for my registration. Just respectfully honor your officer. I want to keep you safe. And you can take care of all of these things. If a crime has been committed, go ahead, open my door, put me in handcuffs. I'm just going to remain silent, and you do what you need to do, and we'll resolve it in court. Don't have a debate on the sidewalk. Just submit to their authority, but do not surrender your Fourth Amendment right to be secure in your persons, papers, properties, effects. It has to be Mirandized, and you can be safe. Now, if you try to go beyond that to stand on your rights without having the things that you're talking about now inside of you and stand in honor of God, you're at risk.
Okay. No, that's helpful. That's a good place to start. And Joel, I want to bring you in more here now as we start to talk more about the biblical response to this stuff. I mean, part of the problem with this is there's so much legalese, there's so many court cases, there's so much confusion. This is from one law firm, and he says, detention in Pennsylvania can be regarded as an investigatory stop. That's a Terry stop. A person being detained, in other words, if, for example, a police officer stops someone walking down the street who's acting suspiciously to ask him or her questions, that would be regarded as a detention. You're not free to go. But it also says from the same law firm, there's no bright line rule as to when a detention becomes an arrest. So again, a lot of this stuff is fuzzy. A lot of it is unclear. The court has ruled on it over and over again, but they continue to have these issues. And it comes down to, in the end, it seems to be they defer to the police officer's personal judgment in the moment. And if they can justify, for whatever reason, well, I was reasonably suspicious, this person looked at me, they didn't look at me, they were walking too quickly, they were walking too slowly, then in court, I mean, sometimes that's held up. Mm-hmm. Well, that police officer in that moment, he had no idea if the guy had a gun, and this is how he responded. And that brings us back to, Joel, this whole idea of police officers and what they do now in America. And I want us to talk about that. And if we have more time, we'll maybe be able to get into a little bit of qualified immunity. But the role of police officers in America today, which of those roles are not necessary at all? And could any of those roles be carried out by another group? You've already touched on this. So I want us to move a little bit. I mean, there's so much more we could dig into, Ryan, with how to respond to these things. And I just wanted to whet people's appetite. And we can maybe bring up some more of these things if we have time. But what are police officers doing today, and who's responsible for those things in biblical society?
Okay, yeah. So let's talk about a word that's almost becoming a bad word nowadays. The word freedom, or independence, if you will. And I would define freedom as that state of affairs where I am not punished for obeying Christ. That is freedom. And so if I'm driving down the road, or if I'm carrying something to help my neighbor, any of these things where I'm not actually committing a crime, according to the Word of God, that I should be free to love God and love my neighbor. That is actual freedom. Driving down the road with the wrong numbers on the back. I mean, how? Let's just ask ourselves this. Let's step back from our status mentality here. The idea that since a person has a gun and a badge, then they can stop you from loving and serving your neighbor. The point that you made, Ryan, earlier, notwithstanding that you signed a contract, which I understand how that certainly can work. But if I have signed a contract that that enslaves me, if you will, just because I want to serve my neighbor, really by God's law, that's an illegal contract and really unenforceable from the standpoint of God's law. I get that's different from constitutional law. Chris, what you're talking about, you're talking about the difference between is and ought. And that's what we argue all the time here on this podcast. We get how it is in Terry versus Ohio, but that does not stop us from arguing how it actually ought to be. And see, one of the reasons why we embrace the idea, well, the police officer, let's give him that authority because he's there to prevent crimes. He's there to make us safer. I love your word fuzzy that you mentioned earlier, Chris. Things get fuzzy. One of the nice things about the Constitution is, for the most part, it's not fuzzy. And the fuzzier things get, then the more power that the person with the gun has. In other words, when we get fuzzy, now we're going from authority to power. Because, well, who's qualified to actually define this? Well, we know who's qualified to define it, the guy with the gun versus the guy without the gun.
Right.
This is why we need to be back to the scriptures here, because from the very beginning, it was the simplest of all commands. It was, you can eat of any tree in this garden, not this one. It's super simple. And what we see then is we get away from the simple word of God. Adam and Eve get thrown out of the Garden of Eden, and now the commands get more difficult. Now we need more. And in our own system here in the United States of America, we have more and more and more of the Federal Register. I still remember my driver's ed teacher in high school telling me, hey, yeah, when you get your license, they give you a book about this thick, right? But when they're coming after you, they have a book about this thick, right? It's a whole lot thicker. Why? We have gotten away from the scriptures here, and now we have to make up our own rules. And without getting this too deeply, there are statements in the scriptures that have to do with putting away evil from among you. Now, for all the statists out there that believe, hey, we just have to have the police officers here around us like all the time because they're going to be protecting us. When the scriptures talk about hearing and fearing, they talk about judging per God's law actual offenses, not suspected offenses. I want to underline that.
Right.
We're not talking about we're talking about actual offenses. And our problem is that we don't judge actual offenses. We've cut down on the actual offense. I mean, we talked about this before, Chris. Up until 1951, rape was a capital offense here in this country. Well, now we're not a lot nicer to rapists. And as we've seen the actual punishment for actual offenses go down, we see the we see the conviction level go down as well, because it's not as big a deal for a rape, and you know what, we don't need quite as much evidence, and we'll put this person away or whatever. Can you see how getting away from the scriptures enslaves us all? A quote here from Horace Greeley is, of all people, is helpful here. It is impossible to enslave a mentally or to enslave mentally or socially. Let me start over again. It is impossible to enslave mentally or socially a Bible-reading people. The principles of the Bible are the groundwork of human freedom. And some people are going to say, well, that's not freedom to punish a capital offense. Well, no. Not for the capital offender, it isn't.
No.
But I'm telling you what, it's freedom for everybody else, especially the people who he's going to kill once he gets out of jail after 5 years.
Right. Now, I think one of the reasons we have this problem is because we have, and this actually ties in with what we were talking about the other day on the podcast yesterday, we've abandoned the role of the people to deal with evil. Now, again, I'm not advocating anarchy. There needs to be civil rulers, but we've said, okay, let's hand everything over to the state. So the police officers, I mean, let's talk about robbery, for example. I mean, why do we need police officers on the streets at all? Only because the people have given over their responsibility to protect, right? I mean, the cop cars a lot of times say to protect and serve. Well, to protect from what and who? If the people are armed, right, and a free citizenry would be able to be armed, they can protect themselves from people who would either murder them, or try to murder them, or rob them, right? So, but because people have given over our responsibility to do these things, and now we turn to the state and we give them all this, we give the state the power now to do what we should be doing. And then we should not be surprised when they take that authority or power and go as far as they can with it.
Yeah. Let me address it this way. Should a police officer, just ask a very simple question here. Should a police officer be every bit as much concerned about breaking the law, let's say even the constitutional law, as a regular citizen? And the answer is yes.
Should be.
There was a should.
They should be.
Should.
Right.
But,
we're talking about ought here.
Yeah, an ought again.
So you have to know, even if you are a person who defends the institution of police officers to the max, you should be asking yourself a question here. And that is, why is it that a police officer is not as in fear of breaking the law as a citizen?
I'll give you an answer to that. And it's a Supreme Court precedent in Graham versus Connor. Graham versus Connor says it's not reasonable for any public servant to know the laws they're to follow, to enforce the laws appropriately.
So it's not necessary. It's not reasonable for them to know the actual law they're enforcing.
Correct.
That's unreasonable.
That's unreasonable.
Well, now I'm really concerned about reasonable
that,
search and suspicion now. What's reasonable? I'm really concerned.
But take it one step further. Ignorance of the law is not a defense of the law in the court of law imposed upon we, the people.
For slobs like you and me.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court takes it one step further. In order to crest the hurdle of reasonableness of an officer, you have to do what I did in that video. The Supreme Court uses a language, belligerent complaint. I need to be belligerent in my complaint with the officer and say, you are depriving me of my constitutional rights under 42 U.S.C. 1983, and recite this stuff. I have to make him informed of Graham versus Connor, Fraser v. Cobb. I have to give him the opportunity. In that video, I said, I would suggest you call the district attorney to inform him, give him every reasonable opportunity to know the law which he is representing. He misrepresented trespass law. I had to correct him. That's my burden. That's my duty. And I want to go back to what you were saying before.
Shouldn't be, but it is in our system.
I agree with this. And that I have a conversation with a dear friend, and it's always these should words. And I want to say, let's stop talking about the should and oughts. Let's talk about what is and are. And our role of law enforcement should be to protect us from harm and trespass. They are inserted when somebody has received harm or somebody has been trespassed against. That's what the Bible would call a good authoritarian. Unfortunately, our society has redefined what harm is. It can be feelings, emotional response. We're getting into this thought speak of you used the wrong pronoun, you've offended somebody, so we're going to incarcerate them. So it's the harm and trespass. We have a duty to ingest God's word, to stand in its truth and righteousness in the face of tyranny. But that requires a tremendous amount of courage. And until you are in that word and allow it to manifest it through you and do your duty to understand the rules, laws, legislation that's put before you, accept that you're on the plantation of tyranny. And until you're willing to unlink those chains of restraint that are upon you, accept your place in this society. And I am not free. I choose as to when I want to safely stand free. And I make my own decision as to I have to consent.
Well, you did a great job in that video. I encourage everybody to watch it. And yeah, working with these man-made rulings and laws, you took the officer to task respectfully that what he was doing was wrong. And it's a great video. So watch that video, and there's a lot of content there. I want to talk more about what you just brought up about the police officers should be held to the same standards as everybody else. And that brings us into qualified immunity, which I don't want to spend too much time on, but it's this special protection created in 1982 by the Supreme Court, and it's ended up being applied as well to police officers. I think initially it wasn't really meant, or the initial intention or focus wasn't on police officers, but it ended up including them. And so the idea is that it's necessary for these people to carry out their jobs. They need to have this qualified immunity, which means they are not held to exactly the same standard that you and I are. They are immune from certain accusations or charges that they have violated someone's constitutional rights, because what we're asking them to do as a matter of public service, quote unquote, is a different level, and therefore they are immune from certain things. So it's built right into all these Supreme Court cases that police officers and other government officials are not held to the same standard as everybody else. And that should be a huge red flag. All right, the Bible says unequal weights, unequal measures. Yeah. Both of them alike are an abomination. So police officers have a different standard. Isn't that's a big problem? Can you elaborate on that, Joel?
Sure enough, is to your point of unequal weights and measures, no question about it. You cannot go to the scriptures and find anywhere where certain people have qualified immunity, for example, to sin. Let's go to the argument that I have with a lot of my Christian friends, saying that, those that don't believe the law word of God are not held to the law word of God. If you're a civil magistrate, if Caesar doesn't have to bow to Christ like everybody else. Well, I want to know who else gets away with sinning. The civil magistrates have the special cutout area where they're allowed to sin. And so this is a problem in our Christian society, where we have this idea that they have this special area, this special playground area, where if they sin, they're not responsible. If we really believe the scriptures, where we are supposed to be safe in our persons, for example, Nehemiah, when he's being attacked. By the enemies of God, he tells the people, listen, get together and fight for your family and your property. That's exactly what he says. So we know, according to the scriptures, we have a right. The Constitution did not create rights. It only recognizes pre-existing rights given by God. That's one of the reasons why what Horace Greeley said, you can't even define freedom. I defy anyone. I know I'm going down a rabbit trail here, but I defy anyone to define freedom outside of the scriptures. It can't be done, because you say, well, I should be able to own what is mine. Well,
you should again.
Yeah, you should, right? But someone else comes along with a bigger gun and says, well, no, I should be able to be. Communists did that. They did that again and again. This is the property of the state. We are allowing you to use the property of the state. Well, okay, no one has any freedom then whatsoever to utilize their own property. So here is the thing that I would want to just pound away at. No one has the right to unlawfully, scripturally speaking, damage the person or the property of another person, no matter what badge they have, no matter what gun they're carrying.
I want to take this in a direction that I want to affirm you. This is a very rooted Christian scriptural response, that you are making morally objective truth claims. Our society and culture has been infected with moral relativism.
Yes.
And evolutionary or neo-Darwinian, that survival of the fittest. So in the survival of the fittest domain, if you have something I want evolutionarily for me to survive, I can take it from you. And moral relativism says, well, there's no moral objection to why I infringed upon you. And discernment and critical thinking needs to be anchored in truth. And scripture is the source for truth. Or, in this world, give me your replacement objective standard of truth. And everything you said, I want to stand free. I want to claim being free. That piece of paper doesn't give me my freedom. It's something that I stand in honor of my king. I'm only going to bend my neck to him, not unlawful, unruleful authoritarians. That's dangerous. And honestly, God says if we're going to honor him, we are going to be persecuted. Our flesh is going to get hurt. And if we're afraid of our flesh, we'll acknowledge your fear.
Yeah, I want to address that a little bit. I had one of my sons growing up. He wanted to, because we talked about evolution, we talked about creation and so forth. And you're exactly right. I mean, how in the world can you claim any objective moral truth in a world where we came from the Darwinian bowl of soup. What's this idea of objective rights? Even example, human rights. Where's that come from?
Where's cannibalism wrong?
Yeah. Look at the the eagle picks a fish out of the water. We say the eagle's wrong. If we kill our neighbor. So one of my kids growing up wanted to create a T-shirt, and you guys can tell me if I was too authoritarian as a father. He wanted to create a T-shirt and wear it around, and the T-shirt said, this is what he wanted to say in the T-shirt: if I kill you, it's just survival of the fittest in action. Don't worry about it.
Oh gosh!
Right, but I
You
thought
nixed
that would
that?
be, I did. I thought to be a little bit indiscreet, and so we never did create the T-shirt.
It's so funny. I have a screenshot on my phone, and I have a T-shirt that says, "If you want to stop and talk to me, and you want it to be consensual, well, you have to pay me. So pay me $10 for 5 minutes, $20 for 10 minutes, and let's enter into a contract. If not, please let me go. I have things that I need to attend to." I did that when I was arrested. I opened up my shirt in prison and said, "We're under contract. This is not consensual." So there's an outstanding invoice for me to be claimed for them taking my time.
Yeah, well, we won't hold our breath on that one.
Right. Well, it'll happen in court.
Yeah. What we see in our culture today, right, we see, just to use these terms, the left and the right, people on the left, if you will, are very upset with police brutality and police injustice. But at the same time, they love their statism. And you can't have one without the other. And I agree with a lot of their concerns, because you see them from the right as well. The police officers arresting people for free speech, whatever. And I agree with some of these things that the people are saying on the left about Terry stops. Now, I don't know the motives and all that stuff, but I have a problem with Terry stops. But my point is, you mentioned that freedom can only come from God's law. And these people want to end police brutality and police authoritarianism, but they don't want to give up statism. They want the state to be God, and if you make the state God, then you need someone to enforce. Right, statism is a bunch of man-made laws, never-ending laws, and then a bunch of enforcement of those laws, and that's what police officers do. They're called law enforcement officers, and in the modern American mind, their job is to enforce whatever laws are made by man. I mean, that's what they'll say. I mean, I've interacted with them from time to time and say, and I want to get into this. I got a quote from, this is Rudolf Höss. I don't know if I say that right, but he was the commandant at Auschwitz. I want to read this quote in a minute, but I've interacted with police officers. You can even that clip yesterday with Matt Truella's associates there. Hey, we're just following the orders. I don't know if they said that there, but we're just following the law. Our job is just to enforce the law. So if that's what you want, if you want statism, where man makes all these laws and then someone has to enforce them, you want police officers with the power to do that. And so it shouldn't surprise us that police officers who are in that position want as much wiggle room as possible.
Sure.
If I was in that position where my job is to enforce thousands of man-made laws against my neighbor who hasn't done anything evil according to God's law, but yet I am charged and paid, and my pension and my retirement, all that stuff depends on me enforcing these man-made laws. And to enforce these man-made laws, I have to put myself in harm's way. There's no doubt police officers put themselves in harm's way. Now, most of the time they shouldn't, but in their service of statism, they put themselves in harm's way. If that was me, I would probably, in my flesh, say, give me as much qualified immunity, as much protection as you possibly can, because I'm going out and I'm enforcing all these man-made laws. In one sense, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because the police officers are saying, look, I didn't make these laws. I'm just enforcing the law. And you've asked me, you, the people, have voted on these legislators to make these laws, and now my job is to enforce them. And so I totally understand why someone like Trooper Kochka or other police officers would use, and I'm not sure, what else, other situations he's been involved in, but just in general, would use all of all this wiggle room to say, well, I'm gonna justify my actions based on all these things. But to your point, Joel, you cannot have freedom without the law of God. the left and the right, they miss the whole point here, because they're arguing over, how the police officer should act when they're both accepting statism. And this
That's
goes to what we talked about, with Luke yesterday in his book, that if we grant to man the power to make never-ending law, then you're going to need a never-ending law enforcement pool, supply of people to enforce that. And so to people on the left who want to cry and lament police brutality, I agree with you in many things, but until you are willing to reject statism and return to biblical law, you can have nothing but statist officers enforcing man-made law.
Can I ask Joel a question here?
Sure.
From a biblical standpoint, would you agree that this is a sequential pattern that happens over time? Freedom, tyranny, freedom, tyranny, freedom, tyranny, correction,
Yeah.
judges, kings. We
Yep.
always return to a king.
Yeah, our friend Matt Torella, who we've mentioned before, has said this again and again. Tyranny is built plank by plank. And we need to understand that what we've enjoyed in the past here in America, the freedom we've enjoyed to go out and be successful or fail. My father, for example, bought a half an acre of ground from a farmer in 1963. There was no zoning back then. There was no all kinds of environmental studies and so forth.
Bog turtles.
Yeah, he just went and bought the property. It's so much more difficult to do that nowadays because our freedom has been taken away from us slowly but surely. What do I mean by our freedom? The freedom to make a contract between my father and the farmer has all kinds of other, shall we say, interested parties involved in this. And yes, it has been happened slowly but surely. I'm more emphasizing the surely because it has definitely been taken from us very surely. My father wanted to buy a piece of property to support his family, me and my 8 brothers and sisters. That's what he wanted to do. That's what he did. That is obeying Christ. That is a man providing for his family according to the scriptures.
Amen.
When we have all these other impediments, we are now harming the ability, as we've said before, this is freedom. Freedom is the ability to obey Christ, the freedom to do that. We have now been attacked in our ability to provide for our families by all these plank by plank by plank interferences in our freedom.
So we're in the Lancaster area, and you all must be familiar with Amos Miller and his private membership association.
Yeah, very familiar.
So that is a man living in honor of God to privately contract man to man, as your father did, to be free. And he has experienced the retaliation of the power and still strives to claim freedom, live in his God-honoring freedom.
He was attacked for loving his neighbor.
I know.
Can we just be clear on this point? No one complained about his raw milk or anything. No one did.
Nope.
He was just a private contractor selling things and people buying certain things from him, and he was attacked. That's an act of loving one's neighbor, and we said this before. A different name for an employee or an employer, a businessman, is someone who is loving his neighbor, if they're doing it honestly. I'm loving my neighbor by providing something that they want and need.
You sound
and
like
he was
Jeff
attacked
Durbin.
for that reason.
You sound like Jeff Durbin. Love thy neighbor.
No, the same thing happened to Reuben King, who's in Lancaster County, who was
Good example.
Found guilty of selling firearms without a license. We'll do that. We covered
Again,
that.
where's the harm?
We're going to cover that again in another episode. We covered it before. But yes, all these things are man-made laws. And I want to just go back to Terry real quick, because I've listened to some commentary on Terry, and it's from the left, and the racism here of this white police officer or detective against these 2 black guys. They never talk about the fact that the crime that they were able to get Terry for was carrying a concealed weapon. Biblically, should not be a crime.
Nope.
So the
Constitutionally, it's not a crime.
All right, and we can get into that, and we'll
Yep.
get into that with Reuben King, a bit of his defense as well. But my point is, the left and also the right, I'm not just picking on the left, they affirm statism, and especially the left affirmed, we can't have people walking around with guns. We can't. We need gun control. And then And then that's the very thing that this white police officer used. And could there be racial issues in there? I'm not talking about that right now. I'm saying that the status law that you affirm is the thing that the charge that they were able to get Terry on. So that should not have been a crime at all, right? So Terry should not have been arrested or charged with anything. And their whole thing was, we're trying to dismiss the evidence that he had this concealed carry because the way it was acquired was unconstitutional. But they're still just living within statism instead of stepping back and saying, we've created this system where police officers or detectives like this guy who arrested Terry, that's his job. His job is to try to find people who've broken man-made laws. And so until they're willing to abandon their statism, you're going to continue to have this, whether it's white on black, black on whatever. It's going to be these people that are empowered to enforce man-made law, and it will always be abused. It will always be abused if you give man the power to enforce arbitrary law, and that's a huge problem.
The horror and the wickedness is built into it, because we have the Bible, which doesn't change. Forever, O Lord, your word is settled in heaven, versus man-made law, which is forever changing. So how can you not be breaking the code? I'll say the code at any point. Who knows what's written? Who knows what's been written in lately? And we're supposed to be running a society like this. And I'm going to appeal to my Christian brothers and sisters here to think about this and consider. You cannot have a society based on changing man-made law. I'm going to use a baseball illustration here. How in the world do you think you could even play a game of baseball if there's people back in some office somewhere constantly changing the rules? That was a foul ball yesterday. Today it's not. You couldn't play baseball. How much more can you have a well-ordered society? If you can't have a baseball game, you're never going to have a well-ordered society based on man's changing laws or rules or codes.
I want to be delicate with what I'm about to try to unpack here.
It's good somebody around here is delicate, because I'm apparently not.
Well, it's kind of like I need to apologize in advance because this could come out offensive.
I'm sure it wouldn't be the first time something came out offensive on this show.
We have no hope of changing the trajectory of our country absent of people, we the people, standing in God's righteousness and truth in opposition to the tyranny. We can't do it in the public square. We're not going to overturn Terry v. Ohio. There's a great broadcaster on YouTube called Delete Laws, Chili DeCastro, and he is a constitutional scholar empowering people to understand what happened with Terry v. Ohio. It is the first step of tyranny, which built this prison industrial complex of incarceration like a hockey stick. It was a way for them to oppress and control us until we ingest God's word, know what we're speaking about today, stand free. Our battle is not going to happen on the sidewalks. It's got to happen in the courts. We have to fight it in the court. We have to take it up to the Supreme Court to break those things. Absent of those people doing that, there is no hope for change.
Okay, if I may, I want to talk about a recent failure of that by me. Okay, confession time. Somebody start playing an organ here, and I will confess. Just this past week, to your point, this past Saturday, I was in. Less than 5 days ago. This past Saturday, I was. Today's date is August 4th, 3rd, whatever. On July 29th of this year, 2023, I was in Harrisburg. Okay, and I was told that I had to stand. There was a sidewalk, and I was protesting a perversion festival there in Harrisburg.
The Capitol steps.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, when Capitol steps, kind of like in the back of the Capitol is where it was, right? And it was public property. That's important.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, Chris. This is going to take us past an hour here, but it won't.
I'm fine, as long as you are.
Okay. It won't. I'll try to make it short. Okay. There was a sidewalk, and consider that the sidewalk had a crack right down the middle of it. Now, I'm not talking about perpendicular to the sides. I'm talking parallel to the sides, right? And a private security guy came along and said, you have to stand behind that crack on the sidewalk.
You're right? Public-private.
Yeah, kind of, right? Kind of. And I said to him, or we said to him, I was with some other guys, I don't think we do. He said, well, you have to talk to my boss. I said, well, we want to talk to him. So a police officer comes over and he says, no, you're allowed to stay on the entire sidewalk, which was completely different from what we had just been told by the private guy, right?
Sure.
But you're not allowed to be in the grass. Well, what happens if we go in the grass? Well, I'll warn you, and then I will arrest you. Okay, now I've been thinking about this, and I'm really glad we're having this conversation here, Ryan, because I've thought about it a lot. Here's the thing. So I asked him, I said, well, it's a public park.
Yes.
It's public, not private. So what statute will I be violating if I enter that park?
Correct.
Right? He said, well, I don't know what statute it is. It was passed. It's a federal statute passed a year ago. Okay. I said, well, then I'm being punished for what I believe. Right? I oppose this. So because of my belief, I'm not allowed to go in that park. I thought about this later, and I think I should have been arrested that day. And here's why. Because if he can't tell me what statute I'm violating, I didn't think about this till later, on what possible basis can he arrest me? And so to your point, yeah, so I stood up to him sort of on the sidewalk, but without getting into the courts, I don't think I did much good at all, frankly.
So in your circumstance, having more knowledge on these precedents, how I conduct myself in that exact scenario, I cannot be removed from public property absent of committing a crime in progress, or a crime about to occur. The probable cause elements from public property. I had this conversation with the officer. He threatens me, if you do not leave, I'm going to arrest you for trespass. I have a little folder that I have a piece of paper in there, which is a color of law violation. I also have a QR code that follows the Privacy Act of 1974. And I say, officer, I just need your name, your badge number, your superior, your phone number, and I need you to either write down the crime that you're alleging I have committed to be removed from public property, or you tell me, I'm going to write it, you need to initial it. No, you're not going to initial it. I take a photocopy of it, and I hand it to him, and I say, officer, you've been served. No confrontation. I've given you a color of law warning violation notice that you unlawfully used your authority to deprive me of my constitutional rights. I'll see you in court.
See, what's happening here, Ryan, is you've got your folders, you've got all this knowledge, and the rest of us are saying, I just want to be left alone. Do I have to work that hard just to defend my rights? And the answer is yes. And I would argue in my case here this past Saturday, I'm going to invoke Alexander Solzhenitsyn here. We didn't love freedom enough. He said, we didn't love it enough. And I would have to say, again, with a confession time here, that you could charge me with not loving freedom enough. It's a lot easier for me to just say, all right, officer, I'll stand out here. I don't want to go against you and get arrested and so forth. But I'm asking myself, Chris, do I love freedom enough? I'm asking myself that right now.
But ask yourself another question. Give yourself permission to own when you are not in the moment of loving freedom enough. I was similarly up at the Capitol steps when End Abortion Now, Jeff Durbin was up there speaking. And I went, my wife gave that to me as a birthday present. And I said, well, let's go walk in the state capitol. Well, I'm a man who walks around with a pocket knife.
Sure.
And in order to get into the capitol, I have to surrender the pocket knife. And I'm standing at security and I'm looking at my wife and she's looking at me and she's like, Ryan, what are you going to do? Are you going to take this stand right now? And I said, sweetie, I love you more than my freedom right now. I'm going to surrender my identification and my knife to this authoritarian so I can enjoy this with you. And I wanted that time with my wife. I knew I was a hypocrite, and I surrendered my freedom in that moment, and I gave myself a pass. I cannot be 100% all of the time.
Yeah, I don't know if I would consider that hypocrisy or submitting to a bully.
I own it from my worldview that I acknowledge my hypocrisy.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there are certainly cases where you could look into that and say, I'm going to choose to turn the other cheek right now. I'm going to submit to this tyranny for a higher purpose.
Yes.
And I agree we should these things should be fought in court. But I also think there's an even deeper issue, because when we've granted the state the authority or power to make all these laws, there are already probably laws that they could get you on. And the more and more are coming out that they're going to make laws that make it illegal to preach the gospel, that make it illegal. And so in that case, even in the courts, you can't win. And so that's why we do need those things. But of course, and I think you would both agree, we need more than that. We need the hearts of the people to change, to want liberty, to want God's law. Because if you don't have God's law and the law and the gospel, you're going to have statism. So I want to talk about two more things here. One, again, if people want to end the effects of racism, right? Like these people on the left talk, the cops are racist and there's such racial disparity in these Terry stops and so on and so forth. I'm going to grant them that. I'm going to grant them that it's disparate to the races. But if you want to end the ability of people to oppress and harass others, I'm going to grant you your whole position that the police officers are racist. I'm not saying everyone is. I'm granting them for the sake of argument. If you want to end that, then get rid of statism. Because if you have biblical law, you won't have law enforcement officers who can go around and cuff people, slam them up against the wall, and search them when they have not done anything evil. And statism allows police officers to harass and oppress people who have committed non-evil acts. And so, of course, there's going to be some people that abuse that. And so, again, I mean, this is one of the things, as Christians, we need to push the antithesis and challenge these pagans who want to come out and cry, we're all about justice as pagans here, and you Christians are want to oppress everybody. No, you want freedom. You want to see the streets, with people not being oppressed and tyrannized for whatever reason. If you want to say it's because of their skin color, fine. For whatever reason, don't grant the government the power to tyrannize people, to terrorize them because they've broken man-made laws.
Yeah, I want to apply this to the left here a little bit too, because they're such hypocrites. They're all about police brutality and so forth. Well, I do remember back in 2020. First, if we go talk about brutality, can we talk about babies that are unborn? If you really have a brutality problem, let's definitely start there, which the left doesn't care about. But I remember this clearly. Remember back when in 2020 during the Summer of Love, when the buildings are being burnt,
right.
all the rioters
Peaceful
and so forth,
protests.
killing people, protests, peaceful protests going on, right? Do you remember that goofy CHOP zone in Seattle, or Chaz zone, where they actually took over like an area of like 10 blocks or whatever, and they set up, guess what? All the people against police officers, they set up their own little police force, and none of these lefties who have a problem with honest policemen, there are such things. None of them had a problem with that. So they are hypocrites through and through. Now, why do I feel like I have to point that out? Because anyone who takes a position not based on the Word of God is ultimately in a hypocritical position at some point. They're going to have to be, and I will not allow them to get away with the idea they really do care about brutality. Because if they really did, they would have said, hey, wait a minute, we're the ones who've been shouting about police. Now you guys in your CHOP zone set up your own little police force, which if you recall, Chris and Ryan, they were extorting money. From the shop owners,
from the merchants,
from the that's the first thing they did, and all the lefties,
Cosa Nostra,
that's what they were, organized crime. All the lefties that have a problem with the police suddenly were like quite silent. Again, I don't blame them in a sense, because what else can they do? They're against the scriptures, they're against God's law, and they're going to ultimately going to do exactly what they said they hate in someone else. This is Romans 1 type stuff. You have a problem with stealing? Do you steal? Paul says, yeah. You have a problem with police officer brutality? Do you exercise it? Yeah. And it didn't take them long either. It was just a couple of days till they were exercising their own brutality.
I want to see if I can take this another level deeper, and this is what my audience is familiar with me doing. And I don't know if you guys know Kent Hovind or Cy ten Bruggencate, and these are presuppositional apologetics. In knowing the source of truth and whether your brain actually functions, do we have the ability for critical reasoning? And my screensaver on my computer, it says, never attempt to reason with unreasonable people, because I want to know if you have the ability to properly think. And Kent Hovind says in the God, the Creator, is the triune of trinities and transcends time, space, and matter, and inserted himself to create these immaterial laws which govern a material existence. And I'm going to call those laws the laws of logic. So when you're talking about hypocrisy, which I completely affirm, I say it's a violation of the law of non-contradiction. Things that are opposite can't be true. So when you get into, and you're crusading for End Abortion Now and the babies that are out there, and I've been on the sidewalks and proclaiming to rescue those children as well, I'm dealing with pagan, broken thinkers that are trying to argue time, degree of development, proximity and location. These are all emotional arguments that are not rooted in logical, critical thinking. And I would not want to categorize this to just the state or to law enforcement. I'm going to categorize it to all humans, that humans, whether you are an officer or you are a technician at a hospital, you're obedient to your master and you're going to follow those dictates, rules, statutes, policies for your self-comfort, and you will not stand in opposition of authority, period. So
let me jump on that, because when you're talking about, Chris, you're talking about the left and the right.
Yes.
But in the end, if we're against God's law, are we not kind of like in the exact same category, really? Because, the right says, well, I'm for law and order. Well, wait a minute, who's law? The Chop Zone, they were for law and order too. They're law and order. So left or right, I think you're in the exact same box if you oppose God's law. What is the difference?
Right, and that's the thing. A lot of the stuff on this podcast, at least, the left looks at it and assumes, oh, you guys are all about Trump and you're about the right. Like no. I'm saying that both left and the right,
not hardly,
both left and right,
not hardly,
are statists. They have accepted statism. They've accepted man-made law. They've denigrated God's law. And this is what we get. We're going to have, if you put man-made law, you're going to have police brutality. It's inevitable. Even with all the good cops there, you've created a system for them.
Call it human brutality, not just police brutality. Humans are deceitfully wicked.
Right. And that's the thing. The police officers are no different than any other people. You put man in a situation where he is tasked with using force to get compliance to man-made law, you're going to have a mess.
He just has more weapons.
Right, and that's what neither left nor right will address. If you want to end human brutality, then don't give one class of people the power to enforce man-made law over another. We could go on and on about that. We're running out of time, but people still might say, well, we really just need cops. We need them out there to protect us. Again, we've covered this briefly. I just want to touch on that one more time. Then I want to read this quote from this Rudolf Haas guy. A society without law enforcement officers as we know them, right? Is that chaos, Joel? I mean, would it just be complete chaos if you had a people? And I think part of it is that we have abandoned biblical law, and this is what we deserve. We deserve tyrants who have basically mini tyrants doing their bidding. So in one sense, is what we deserve, and we couldn't handle freedom in America right now because we have rejected God's law. But if you had that change of heart, and if you had people who wanted to take responsibility for their protection, the protection of their neighbor, what would you need police officers for? I don't even think we would need them. Ryan mentioned we need them I don't think we would need them at all, in the sense of, oh, there's something happening here, I need to call the police. Right? The civil magistrate could come in after the fact. What are your thoughts on that, Joel?
Yeah, I'm going to go in this direction. The fear of the Lord, the beginning of wisdom, the fear of the Lord, beginning of knowledge. Why did we used to, I don't know, I guess we still do it somewhat, swear on the Bible to tell the whole truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? What we were doing then was we were exercising a public display of our fear of the Lord.
Fear and trembling of judgment of God.
That's right. In other words, if I lie, what was happening there was, if I lie, I am calling on the judgment of God against me if I tell a lie.
But God says we all lie. Yeah. God says we all lie. So are we doing that in true fear and submission of that, in that oath and proclamation to God? Because God calls us, we're all liars. And I have to admit, God, I'm going to do my best to honor you in what I speak.
Right here, because what we're talking about here is one of the commandments: do not bear false witness against your neighbor.
Yeah.
So I am standing up here and saying I am not going to be bearing any false witness against anyone. That's why that's why the whole idea of telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I am going to go back in my comment to once again to the church. I can't help it. I want to talk about tyranny in the Old Testament. In the northern 10 tribes, which became, they split off from Israel during the reign of Solomon's son, they went off on their own and rejected the law of God. And when the kings became tyrants, oftentimes it was a bloody mess. He got killed, his son or someone else got put, and there was just people killed all the way around. Now, we had that same problem in the southern kingdom under David. If David gets away with killing Uriah the Hittite and stealing his wife,
Go get Bathsheba. Go get her.
yeah, there is no end to what David can do next.
Right.
But what happens is Nathan the prophet comes to him in the fear of the Lord and says, "You're the man. You're guilty of this." This is where I believe the church has totally failed. We are much more interested in getting a picture, a photo op, get that in the paper, than we are in confronting wicked magistrates. We have no interest in doing that. So if we will not do that, we're going to get the tyranny, to your point, Chris, that we deserve, and it's going to be far worse. And David would have gone down that road of the tyrants of the northern kingdom. It was bloody enough for what he did. It would have been far worse. So I am just taking a moment here to say, where is the church? If we really do have tyranny, Chris, where's the church?
Where are the pastors within the church calling it out?
Where?
I don't have an answer for that. Yeah. I see the pulpit draped with the American flag right next to it, and I'm saying kick the flag out of the sanctuary. The Bible is why we're in this building. The state goes outside. And,
yeah. Well, the church has accepted, again, I'm going to bring it up again, statism. They've accepted the idea that Christ is not king over the state, and we give, the state has the power to make all these laws and to tell us what we can and can't do, absent of biblical law. Who cares what the Bible says? If the state tells you to do it, you have to do it.
And Chris, is this a fair definition of statism? The fear of the state greater than the fear of the Lord. Is that a fair definition?
Yeah, it doesn't seem unfair. I mean, it's the state can tell you what to do, and the state can make all these laws, and you better follow them, because if not, you're going to be in big trouble. And that's what we have. And again, if you do not, you cannot argue with our current law enforcement. You can't argue with Terry stops. You can't argue with human brutality, police brutality. You can't argue with the violation of the Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment. You can't argue with any of that stuff if you embrace or accept statism, because you are saying man is the final authority, and we need people out there to enforce man's laws. I want to read this quote now from Rudolf Höss. He was tried at the Nuremberg trials for his involvement at Auschwitz. And his response is telling, and he's going to say, look, I'm just following orders. This is what he said. He said, "Don't you see, we SS men were not supposed to think about these things. It never even occurred to us. We were all so trained to obey orders without even thinking that the thought of disobeying an order would simply never have occurred to anybody, and somebody else would have done just as well if I hadn't. I really never gave much thought to whether it was wrong. It just seemed a necessity," end quote. Is that not the mindset of the modern law enforcement officer? And is that not what the church itself accepts and embraces? Your job as a police officer is to enforce man-made law. That's your job. I mean, and with statism, how can you fault Rudolf Höss?
I don't see how you can argue with it. In a statist society, I do not know how you can argue with that.
And how can you argue with the police officer who says, look, I'm just enforcing the law. The law came down that said that you're not allowed to speak publicly about homosexuality. I'm just following the law. That's what statism gives you. Right?
Can I take that one step higher?
Mm-hmm.
This testimony was in the development of what was called the Nuremberg Code. The United States has not embraced the Nuremberg Code as defined. They tried to do it in spirit and intent with their language. put that to where we are today. We had this wonderful thing that happened with some virus that was floating around that had some mandates and employment threats, whether we submit to getting some jab in the arm. Many businesses were under the threat of the government to be shut down. These were, you can hypothesize that this was a medical experimentation on willing people who did not produce or submit to informed consent and wound up saying, I'm going to be the statist. I'm going to follow and submit those people creating these laws to participate in this medical experimentation without understanding the consequence. Could be a rail car, could be dropping gas canisters into your home just because they're following. So I just wanted to emphasize your point a little.
Yeah. Joel, anything you want to add to this? We're just about out of time, but I hope I'm making sense here.
You are.
If you give man the authority to add to God's law, disregard God's law, make man's law, and then you have a system of people to enforce that, how can you fault them? And that's kind of my defense of police officers, that in the statist mindset, I totally get it. I totally get it. Yeah. And so that's why we need to attack statism at its core.
I'll say this. Every single person is going to fear someone. You're either going to fear man or you're going to fear God. And the fear of man definitely brings a snare, according to the scriptures. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's the beginning of knowledge. Joshua said, choose you this day whom you will serve. Today we need to say, choose you this day whom you will fear.
Well said. Ryan, final thoughts?
I just have to echo that. And I stand in humble adoration of my King. And I put myself in positions for myself, but to advocate for others, to model what that looks like. And I don't want to, I'm challenging people not to do that, but to stand and understand who are you obedient to? And when you called out the church and I call out the pastors, I need to call out myself. What am I doing? And I tell people, don't do it until I reorganized your priorities. Let your yes be your yes and your no be your no. Don't be in between. Don't make a statement as to this is who I should be. Let me see who you really are.
All right. Well, we've covered, there's so much more we could cover there. I mean, I hope we at least have scratched the surface, especially as it relates to law enforcement officers, police officers, with a different perspective than either the left or the right has been giving. There's much more we could say. There's probably people that are going to have a bunch, objections. Well, you want a society with no law enforcement officers. Again, that's partly true, but you have to understand when you have biblical law, the people are empowered to protect themselves, right? If the people are empowered to protect themselves, criminals are not going to be, if you're a criminal, would you rather be in a society where you have a small force of law enforcement officers who may come after you if you go out and try to murder or rape someone, or would you rather be in a society where almost every citizen is armed and those that aren't are, have family members that would protect them? Well, if the criminal would rather be in the police state because there's less of an ability for the police to get you than in a free society, the people would be able to. So again, there's so much here, but at the core, when you abandon biblical law, you open the door to statism, and this is what you're going to get. So I would encourage everybody to check out the Cultural Contrarian. There's a YouTube page.
Go to culturecontrarian.org, or if you search anywhere with the @ Culture Contrarian, I have tons of information educationally. Put in an email address, and they'll give you some free ebooks to kind of get started on what I speak about in a Matt Trewhella Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrate type of walk.
Okay, yeah, and there's a lot more, and maybe we'll be able to cover some more stuff as well. Joel, can you let people know about the upcoming conference coming up in September?
Yes, the Future of Christendom Conference. We're having Dr. James White as a speaker and debater, debating the question, is a gay Christian an acceptable term for being a Christian? I'm a little bit fuzzy on the exact question. That's going to happen on Saturday night. This is September 15th and 16th. And for the whole weekend, $125 for the entire weekend. You get to hear James White once in the debate, once in a Friday evening address, many other excellent addresses. And we're going to be doing the theme of the conference is the gospel at war. And that might be offensive to some people, but gentlemen, we know that the gospel is either going to be at peace or it's going to be at war. and there's no and if the gospel is at peace with this wickedness that's going on in our culture now, if your gospel is at peace with that, then you don't have the gospel. You have something else going on here.
It's called the false gospel.
That's exactly what it is. There is no peace, saith my God, to the wicked. So we know that from the scripture. So we hope you can come and be a part of this. Many excellent presentations. We have presentations called expositions where we speak for 18 minutes to a topic, and we will be. Our topics are the gospel at war with various gospel at war with the state, the gospel at war with the yellow bus. For example, Chris will be presenting that. And we hope you can come. Go to futureofchristendom.org to register. That cost of $125 actually covers a meal on Saturday and also a snack on Saturday evening during the debate. Love to see you there. You won't regret it.
Can I ask a favor? Because I want to be there. I want to meet James White. Is there a way that I could be introduced to just shake his hand in a photo op? Because I've been following him for decades.
I'm sure we'll find a.
I would love that. That would be my birthday present.
I can't guarantee I can do it, but I guarantee I will try as hard as I can.
That would be awesome for me. Even I could get in proximity. I wanted the bearded gospel tribe.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll find a way. I hope you can come, Ryan.
I'm just teasing.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. And thank you both. Thanks, Ryan, for coming all the way out here for this podcast. Joel, thanks again for coming in. More to come on this. I think we need to address more about the modern police system, and there's much more that could be said, but we're always going to return to the Bible. That's our standard, and it does indeed, contra Rolling Stone sentiment, the Bible does indeed give us a just society if we follow it, and our modern American system does not. So for more information about the Lancaster Patriot, go to thelancasterpatriot.com. Until next time, remember that Christ, not the state, is king. Take care.